there was a strange stillness. The birds, for example, where had they gone? Many people spoke of them, puzzled and disturbed. The feeding stations in the backyards were deserted. The few birds seen anywhere were moribund. They trembled violently and could not fly. It was a spring without voices. On the mornings that had once throbbed with the dawn chorus of robins, catbirds, doves, jays, wrens, and scores of other bird voices, there was now no sound. Only silence laid over the fields, and the woods, and the marsh. A grim specter has crept upon us almost unnoticed, and this imagined tragedy may easily become a stark reality we all shall know. In the small village of Unadilla, Nebraska, life persists, as does the life in the countryside surrounding it. Otoe County is full of open skies, expansive fields of corn and soybeans, all of it a complex ecosystem that never rests. Farther down the graded gravel roads, this female American kestrel, June, works hard to start a family. She's just laid her fourth egg. She shares incubation duty with her mate, July. The two relieve each other to stretch their wings and hunt in the farmland just outside their nest box. But for kestrels across North America, achieving what June and July have is a growing struggle. Since the 60s, kestrel populations have been trending downward, with no clear-cut reason why. An organization called the American Kestrel Partnership has created a map using monitored nest box data from all across North America. This map demonstrates the changes in kestrel populations over time. The red regions on the map indicate a greater than 5% decrease on average. Green is just the opposite, with a greater than 5% increase on average. The yellow regions don't surpass a 5% change either way. In a perfect world, the entire map would be yellow, with just the average, normal fluctuations. But a look at those numbers over time show reason to be concerned. I was 8 years old when I first saw a kestrel. It was a flight demonstration. The details are hazy, but I remember sitting on gymnasium bleachers and a handler walked in with a bird on her glove. And then they flew this kestrel down from the top of the bleachers, down and back up. That memory has laid dormant for 15 years, but I think it's been a driving force in my passion for birds and really why I got involved with the conservation movement in the first place. Joining my local wildlife rescue team really opened my world. It was empowering to find others who shared my connection with the natural world. It gave me people to look up to, specifically my mentor and someone I'm really glad to call a friend today, Lynn. She's no biologist, she's a retired elementary school teacher. It only makes me respect her more. She cares about the little guy. I found myself looking to her whenever the job got hard, and every time she showed resilience. It was always hard when something would come in that we couldn't save, but there were so many success stories, and those were the ones we lived for. You know, you see an abandoned wood duckling, and in 6 weeks he's full grown and you get to release him. There's no better word than rewarding. And then there were the more unconventional animals.
The pelican in particular. He had to undergo a full wing amputation after he suffered a really bad break, and he was so malnourished. There was no color in his bill when he came to us.
But he came out of his shell. The more he spent time with us, the more used to us he got. And, you know, he had his own personality. He loved goby fish. He didn't really like me in particular. And he had a happy dance. And then we were driving him to his new home at the Lee G. Simmons Wildlife Safari Park. You know, we said our goodbyes, and he stayed true to that personality of his and bites me again.
In Otoe County, June and July have their talons full, with 3 chicks. The temperature inside the nest box is 107 degrees Fahrenheit. June doesn't even feel the need to brood the chicks. The extreme temperatures may keep the chicks warm, but it's clearly rough for June. Just look at her panting. Still, she stays close by to keep an eye on the chicks, protect them in case of a predator's attack. The 3rd chick has only just hatched this morning. Its fluffy down is still damp from the egg. Kestrels lay eggs in 2-day intervals, and they hatch in a similar pattern. I can't tell if she's given up on the 4th egg. This egg is an anomaly. It was laid very late compared to the others. Incubation takes an average of 30 days, so it's no wonder that an egg laid on June 24th hasn't hatched on July 5th. June keeps the chicks warm overnight, even as rain and hail bear down on the box. Already the chicks are growing up fast. By the next day, the oldest chick has opened its eyes. These chicks are completely reliant on their parents for food and warmth. After hatching, kestrel chicks aren't able to regulate their own body temperature for between 10 and 14 days. The oldest chick seems to get first dibs whenever it's feeding time. To keep track of who's who, I started calling them Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. July returns to the nest box to visit his chicks. They don't seem too excited when they notice he doesn't have any food. June takes the opportunity to feed Thursday while Tuesday's asleep. Competition between chicks can be fierce, but with a clutch of only 3 chicks and 2 very attentive parents, all 3 seem likely to fledge.
When you're 8 years old, you don't remember the logistical parts of an experience, but you always remember how it made you feel. And that was the case for that flight demonstration memory. I didn't know the name of the bird at the time, but I do remember how big the world suddenly felt. Anything was possible. There was so much out there I didn't know and that I likely never would, but that also gave me so much opportunity for discovery. In late summer of 2020, Lynn and I were going on a release with some ducklings we'd rehabbed. We set off to do the release in Otoe County. One of the folks I met there was Hopp, or Gordie. He was interested in bluebirds, and as it turns out, he monitors a few hundred bluebird boxes for an organization called Bluebirds across Nebraska. He got to showing me pictures of nests and bluebirds, but he scrolled one too far, and there was a picture of a different bird there. She was just sitting on her eggs in there, and though she looked awfully offended that Gordon was looking at her, she didn't seem to mind that he was checking in. "Oh," Gordon said, those are kestrels. I got boxes up for them too." And I nodded, thinking that name sounded familiar. Kestrel. "You know what a kestrel is, don't you?" he asked. And I immediately lied and said, "Yeah." And he didn't buy it, and I could tell from his expression. So no, I fessed up immediately, and we both laughed. So he started in telling me more about kestrels, and it all clicked. Kestrel. That dormant memory of the flight demonstration woke up. Everything changed when I moved to Iowa City to finish up college. I never realized how lucky I was to have a backyard full of birds until I moved into a 3rd-story apartment downtown. I was 300 miles away from Lynn and the rescue. I got stuck in dual classes that were required for my major, so I did what anyone in my situation would have done. I went on the internet. I became fixated on a live stream I found on this YouTube channel by artist and wildlife advocate Robert E. Fuller. The cameras were set up around his property in the Yorkshire countryside in England, and they captured a sight of birds of prey I had never experienced before. He had built cameras into their nest cavities. Robert had built a community for people all over the world who could chat in real time, and we all got really invested in the stories of these birds and in each other. There were times it felt like reality TV, but actually good. There were times it was wholesome, like watching a parent see their hatched chick for the first time. There were times it was heartbreaking when a fan favorite owl disappeared. There were times it was tense, like a fight between a kestrel and a barn owl over a particular nesting site. Robert captured the good, bad, and ugly. But that's what nature is. A combination of beauty and terror, of birth and loss. Robert's streams, his stories, they brought people together during the pandemic when we were all isolated from our normal lives. And even after the pandemic, just the simple joy of checking in on the neighborhood. I would check the streams while I brewed my morning coffee.
there's a surprise in the nest box. The fourth egg is hatched. This youngest chick, Friday, is so much smaller than the others. Late on June 24th, his egg hatched just 13 days later, much shorter than the average 30-day incubation period. It's a complete departure from everything we know about kestrel eggs. With June and July out hunting for food, this little chick relies on its siblings for warmth. She'll have to compete with her 3 older siblings for food. It's not uncommon for the youngest chick in a clutch not to make it. Friday has a tough life ahead of her.
When I started forming my plan, I looked at what was already being done about kestrel decline. And as it turns out, there were still quite a bit of blanks we needed to fill in. I couldn't build 1 million nest boxes and hang them up all across the country by myself. But that's the beauty of conservation. It's a team sport. We all offer what we can, and in my case, I could offer a story.
Southeastern Nebraska, where I grew up, is right on the border of the declining kestrel populations and where they're holding steady. Our family farm in Pawnee County is the ideal habitat for kestrels. Kestrels nest in tree lines on the edge of fields, since the farmland provides ideal hunting grounds with an abundance of prey. I designed my nest boxes larger than they needed to be, so I'd be able to fit motion-activated cameras inside. I set to work building them with my limited amount of woodworking knowledge and mounted them mid-April. I placed an exterior motion-activated camera outside each box as well, so I could capture ingoing and outgoing birds. And then all that was left to do was wait. The whole point of my plan was to see life inside the nest box. I think of the peregrine falcon. Leading into the early 1970s, there was a dramatic decrease in the peregrine falcon populations nationwide. It hit hardest east of the Mississippi River. They were just gone. West, 80 to 90% of the populations had perished. It was found that the falcons themselves were doing everything right. They had plenty of food and nesting sites, but the problem was with the food chain itself. Pesticides utilizing DDT were on the rise. When the falcon's main source of prey, field rodents, ate afflicted vegetation, the DDT entered the food chain, so that when the falcons ate the rodents, the DDT was passed to them, causing severe calcium deficiencies. The peregrine falcons were laying eggs that weren't viable. The shells were thinning and would break when the falcons tried to incubate them. 2 years after the populations dropped dramatically, DDT was banned in the US, thanks to activists like Rachel Carson, whose book Silent Spring sparked an environmental movement. Thanks to the creation of the Peregrine Fund and its effort to breed peregrines in captivity and release them, the species began to rise again. And then they did the unthinkable.
In 1999, the peregrine falcon was removed from the endangered species list.
Quantitative research identified a problem. Qualitative research identified the problem, and passionate activism helped us fix it. At this point, we know kestrel populations are declining, but we're at the stage of figuring out why. So I waited more. A few times other birds showed up, but no kestrels. I'd seen them on the farm before, so I was getting worried. Did I place the boxes wrong? Was my design too big? I captured riveting footage of deer, wind, and wild turkeys. My nothing streak continued into the summer, and soon it was mid-June. I knew the odds of kestrels nesting in the boxes were slim to none. If a pair in the area were going to have a second clutch, I figured they'd just use their original nesting site. I was heartbroken. All the planning and investment gone. If I was going to capture nest box footage this season, I needed help. So I was off to Unadilla, Nebraska. Though it had been years since we spoke, Gordon remembered me. We picked up right where we left off.
There used to be, countryside was divided up in 40s and 80s and quarters, and so the bluebirds had a good place to go to then. Well, then they come along with the bulldozer and they decided they didn't need the fences anymore. And so there went that habitat for them. And then they decided they didn't need the trees anymore. So there went that habitat, and pretty soon you're looking at a section of ground with no habitat on it.
Bluebirds Across Nebraska is made up of your everyday Nebraskans, dedicated to restoring the once depleted bluebird populations in the state. In addition to the over 300 bluebird boxes that Gordon monitors throughout the season, he's also mounted a dozen kestrel boxes and checks in on them regularly.
So that's what we're doing, is try to reintroduce some habitat, but we're also putting up boxes, bluebird boxes, what we call them, and they're designed for the bluebird especially. They're a secondary cavity nester. The woodpeckers will drill a hole, make a hole for their nest in a tree, usually a dead tree, but they'll only use that 1 year. So then the bluebirds have a chance to come along the next year, and if they find that hole, they can use that as their nest. But that's part of my job as a coordinator. Is I would go out and visit with people and try to convince them that they need to put up a couple bluebird boxes and join our organization. And of course, I would like to have them to monitor the boxes. Like I say, well, I've never seen a bluebird around here. I don't know what a bluebird looks like. And so I'll continue talking to them and convince them that they need to be in the program, and we'll put some bluebird boxes up, and half the time before I would leave, there would be a bluebird sitting on the box already. They say, well, where'd he come from? But he's just been there all the time, you just didn't notice him.
Fortunately for me and my project, Gordon agreed to take me on a ride along to some of his kestrel nest boxes.
Yeah, I got a little stick here that I put hold the arm up on the wood duck box so it stays up off the ground. You don't have to really bend over to check your box that way. Got a 3/8 bolt here. with a nut on it that holds the box to this 4x4. And there's a 1/2 inch bolt down at the bottom that it pivots on. So we pull it off of there and slowly, kinda, and as we try to keep the box perpendicular as it comes down. And set it on there, and that leaves the box up so we can check it. Can't see anything through there. Oh yeah. So here we got babies. They're at least right around 3 weeks old, I would say. 2.5 to 3 weeks. There are 4 of them. And she had 4 eggs, so she hatched all her eggs. Good job, Mama. So she's out here flying around somewhere. I didn't see her when we drove up, but she's not far away. So we'll close that back up and see if Ell wants to put a camera in here. Okay, Ell put a camera in here. There's 4 babies in there, about 2.5 to 3 weeks old. They're about half feathered out. And so we're going to watch when Mama comes to feed them. There's a lot of evidence of food in there. There's bones from different kind of animals. They once in a while we'll get a bird. There was some feathers in there. So that's all right. Mother Nature takes care of everything. So we're going to set it back up again. And these things are heavy, but that's the way it is. So we want to try and keep the box vertical again. Stick it on the post. And with any luck, I'll find a nut in my pocket.
As complex as Gordon's nest box design seems, it sure looked easy compared to the trouble I went through mounting my boxes on trees. When Gordon talks about monitoring a nest box, he means checking in on it regularly over the breeding season. He'll count eggs and chicks. At the end of the season, Gordon reports this data to the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, which tabulates nest box results from all over North America and provides vital information on population changes. As grateful as I was to put my camera in the box, it was already a tight squeeze for the kestrel chicks. They shifted the camera around and fogged over my lens, but I didn't want to stress them out by going to the box every day to try to fix the angle. I didn't get much usable footage from this box, but when I retrieved the camera 2 weeks later, all 4 chicks were gone. That same day, Gordon took me to another kestrel box where he's observed a female kestrel sitting on 3 eggs for several weeks. The eggs were due to hatch any time. This kestrel's reaction to Gordon's gentle touch demonstrates the docile nature of these birds. They're fierce hunters, but recognize their chances against a human don't look good. Gordon's boxes weren't designed to hold a camera inside, so right there he tried to help me modify them on the spot. I would still go on to modify the boxes a few more times throughout the season. As ramshackle as the box ended up looking, it served its purpose and protected the birds inside. All 4 chicks seem to be doing well. Little Friday's eyes aren't open yet, and she still isn't very active, but the older chicks seem content to play with each other rather than pick on her. Still, the 4 chicks clump together to stay warm when June is out hunting. As the chicks grow, they'll require more and more food deliveries from their parents. But whenever dutiful mom June isn't out hunting, she's in the box to protect the chicks. It's easy to project human mannerisms onto this Kestrel family. The cuddling isn't necessarily affectionate, it's warmth. June and July have their work cut out for them just getting enough food to feed the chicks, so it's not intentional that June doesn't give Friday special attention. In trying to understand the behaviors of birds of prey, there's no better place to see a variety of them than the Iowa Raptor Project. Located in the McBride Nature Recreation Area between North Liberty and Sullen, the Iowa Raptor Project is tucked back in the woods and makes a great getaway for folks of all ages.
Birds of prey, they have their own language that you have to learn. Maybe if they're preening and they're kind of cleaning their feathers, that's a sign they're very content. Maybe breathing a little heavier is a sign that they aren't as content.
Holly Anthony is a lifelong falconer, and she's been working with birds of prey for over 12 years. Now, as assistant director at the IRP, Holly oversees the education programs, conservation efforts, and training of over 24 volunteers, including myself. All in addition to her priority role of monitoring the well-being of IRP's 17 resident raptor ambassadors.
They are pets, and they are wild animals at the end of the day. They really deserve our respect and reverence, I like to say.
Becoming a falconer takes years of dedication, including a state-given exam and apprenticeship under a master falconer. Holly taps into the natural instincts of birds of prey, which rewards her the rare opportunity to forge a partnership with a wild animal.
Falconry, it is an ancient sport. It's a cultural heritage. Started in Mongolia, we believe, back in like 1500 BC. Modern day falconry, it looks a lot different, but there are falconers in every state in America. There's clubs. There's also falconers all over the world. So falconry is to catch game with a trained bird of prey. I trap a bird from the wild. They are a young bird. They have just hatched. They've just fledged. You're not allowed to trap any adult birds because they are the breeding stock of the wild. So there's lots of rules and regulations. And so then you basically train this wild bird to accept you into their hunt. And at first they're very scared of you. They think they're going to be lunch. And they come to realize that it's beneficial for them to stay with you when you release them to hunt because you're going to flush out rabbits or whatever you're hunting with them. So it's a relationship or understanding between a wild animal, a bird of prey, and you. So Omaha, he's about 7 years old and he was hit by a car. So that's why we have him here. So he's a great raptor ambassador and he gets to teach others about kestrels in the wild. So you can kind of see his wing is hanging a little bit. They have what's called eye spots on the back of their head. So if you can kind of see Omaha here, he has 2 eye spots. And that is like a moth, will have these eye spots to kind of ward off predators. It's another kind of protective thing for them. That predators will think, they've already seen me, so I'm going to move on. So kestrels actually have this too. They have these eye spots, which is really cool. So they have what's called a malar stripe. So hawks, owls, vultures, eagles, they don't have this, but falcons do. So with Omaha here, you can see he has a malar stripe that goes straight down from his eye. And so all falcons have that.
Holly's hunted with 2 kestrels during her career as a falconer, and it's given her insight into their hunting techniques.
There's 2 different ways that they like hunting. So one of the ways is a sit and wait. So they'll kind of sit on a telephone line or a post, and it has like a commanding view, and they will look around for their prey. So like voles and mice. Actually, kestrels also love grasshoppers. So they will hunt grasshoppers as well. So oftentimes if you're a falconer and you're going to hunt with your kestrel, you might be catching grasshoppers that season, and you have to be okay with that because some kestrels just love hunting grasshoppers instead of mice or sparrows or things like that. They also do a really cool hunting strategy. It's called hovering, and oftentimes you'll see this if you're going down the highway. They'll be right in the middle with the median. Maybe there's a strip of grass, and they'll be hovering and just looking down, and then they'll dive down and grab their prey.
The IRP provides a home for raptors like Omaha, whose injury wouldn't allow him to survive in the wild. Others have imprinted on humans and lack the skills to survive on their own. For these non-releasable birds, the IRP is the next best thing. And with passionate leadership from Holly, I'd say that's pretty good. The 4 chicks grow every day. The restless chicks keep June from getting a good night's sleep. And they're getting too big to brood. June is spending less time in the box, helping July hunt for the growing chicks. These chicks still have no idea what the outside world looks like and the challenges it may have in store for them. A troubling statistic lies ahead. 60% of kestrels don't live past their first year. The oldest wild kestrel documented was 11 years, 7 months. Captive-bred kestrels have been reported to live 14 years, but sadly, those are extremes. The average wild kestrel that survives its first winter will live just shy of 3 years. On the 12th, we get our first good look at Tuesday's incoming feathers. On the 13th, the chicks share a garter snake. By the 15th, Tuesday is 14 days old and is starting to develop a malar stripe. At 8 days old, Friday is coming into her own. She fends off Thursday from taking her insect.
Why is the kestrel in a very slow decline? I think a lot of it has to do with just habitat loss to begin with. Specifically in Iowa, it's the most altered landscape in America because of our great farmland. But it also makes it a lot harder for kestrels to find those habitats that they need. They need large grasslands with tree lots. Also, I think with invasive species like the European starling taking some of their nest boxes, taking some of their cavities, that also could play a role in the slow decline.
It's those very same reasons that bluebird populations suffered in Nebraska and throughout the Midwest. And simply put, nest boxes are giving bluebirds another chance. In 2020, Gordon had 375 bluebird boxes to monitor, and 2,100 bluebirds fledged. It worked for the bluebirds, and there's no reason to think it wouldn't work for the kestrels.
As far as the kestrels in Otoe County, I don't know. In the area around Unadilla probably is the only area that they're increasing. That's because I put the boxes up. Like I say, I don't know where they nest if they don't nest in a kestrel box.
Gordon has a point. More and more often, dead trees are cut apart and hauled off to clear more land for human use. These hollow trees house an entire ecosystem. Removing them gives cavity nesters like bluebirds and kestrels fewer and fewer options. Habitat fragmentation and loss stems from the illusion of human advancement. But there is an upside to this. We're in control. We have the power to mitigate the damages we're doing to the environment. We as humans have the tendency to act once it's too late. It doesn't have to be that way for kestrels. Kestrel decline is slow, but at the end of the day, decline is decline.
My motivation to act came from different sources. That hazy flight demonstration from 15 years ago, from Robert's live stream cameras and willingness to create emotional connections to these birds, from Holly's leadership in Raptor education, and from Gordon, whose unparalleled passion for Nebraska wildlife isn't something you can learn from a textbook or attending a lecture. When I came to a decision to do something, I considered changing majors. I mean, what can an English major do about kestrel decline, and especially when they're not even considered a species of concern by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology? As it turns out, an English major can do a whole lot.
More and more often, food deliveries are just handoffs. The chicks are now able to tear it up and eat it on their own. Even little Friday. With their feathers coming in, they're starting to look like full-grown kestrels.
Started here is I really want people in Iowa City, when they think of Iowa City, when they come to visit, one of the main attractions or the things that they think about is, oh, the Iowa Raptor Project is there. They do amazing things for birds of prey, they do education, they do awesome research.
I've got way too many boxes to check now. I'm getting up in age, and pretty soon I won't be able to do any of them. And I don't know what's going to happen with them at that time, but
All of our enclosures here at the IRP are old, they're tired, they're about 30 years old. You know, we always talk about kind of like zoo quality exhibits where we can do a lot more like temperature control, make it a lot easier too to care for the birds.
I got 2 daughters. I got boxes up down there where they live, and I just will check them myself. They're just not interested in it, and you got to find somebody that is really interested in it.
There's always something that you can do for raptor conservation. Building kestrel nest boxes, to not throw any trash outside of your car like window, or like say you're eating an apple or something, you throw it out the window. That attracts rodents and a lot of things kestrels like to eat to the road. And the same with barn owls that are, you know, endangered in Iowa. So just donating to like your local like raptor conservation agency.
Yeah, so this is something that's really happened quite organically. I used to just be quite simply a wildlife artist, very lucky to travel around the world. And then the connection with people really started when we hit COVID and lockdown. That things really changed then, because we started live streaming what we were doing, and then we literally had a connection then with people. We could see their comments, we could see what they were thinking, and it was like a worldwide shared interest in wildlife. And what we were then able to do is to bring in all of the characters of the wildlife that we're filming here, and it was really quite something for me, really, because I was crazily passionate about this wildlife, but then, you know, seeing all these other people that were equally as crazy, not crazy, but passionate about what we were doing here and connecting to this wildlife, it was something that was quite life-changing for us all here.
And they will actually fly at the Hawkeye games, and so they're in front of like 70,000 people, and so we love that because we get to kind of bring attention to birds of prey in Iowa and the challenges they face as well, and that like conservation message to a crowd of people that maybe wouldn't see that or be interested in that, and then all of a sudden they see a live bird of prey fly over their head, and maybe they'll be more interested in that.
Because I know I'm pretty unusual and very almost obsessive level of studying the wildlife here, but that then came across that other people were truly interested and enjoyed what we were doing, and to share that on a worldwide basis is just quite extraordinary really. We can have tens of millions of people tuning into our channels every single month, which is quite incredible.
I enjoy what I do or I wouldn't do it. People go out and golf. I got to golf 5 times a week. They're not interested in bluebirds or anything. They want to golf. It's not a habit. It's something that they got to do. They just can't live without it. Well, I'm kind of like that, only with the bluebirds. And I enjoy going out. I ride the 4-wheeler all the time, and there's so much wildlife that you see as you're going down the road. The deer and the turkeys, and you watch the turkey buzzards. Once in a while you'll see an eagle.
We as humans, we see ourselves as almost better, more intelligent, more successful than other animals. Essentially we are an animal, and us as humans we think we're the best, and I would probably disagree with that, because it's only the humans that go around destroying everything around it that they're literally dependent on. And to say I'm putting human traits on there to what I'm studying, it's a natural thing to do. So it's quite I get criticised no matter what I do sometimes, and I don't mind being criticised. It opens up debate. But when we're watching animals and birds, if we put a name to that animal or that bird, we can get people to connect to it more, and that's why we do that. It's to cause a connection.
On the 28th, at 27 days old, Tuesday climbs into the nest box entrance. This is his first look at the outside world. But he still has to build up the courage to take his first flight. Tuesday finds the courage. While Wednesday considers fledging in the nest box entrance, Thursday practices her flapping technique.
The industrial world would have us see nature as an adversary, something to conquer, to cut and paste in ways that benefit us. Biodiversity doesn't get a voice in human advancement. but the flora and fauna of the Earth feel the effects when their habitats are destroyed or fragmented for the sake of human profit. If you're walking to the bank and there's an art gallery in the way, you wouldn't burn it down just to get there quicker. June and July's story is art. The way they bring life into the world, overcome food scarcity and bad weather only to do it all over again. All of it goes unnoticed to the human eye. Humans aren't the only complex life forms on this earth. We're just the only ones we see regularly. There's art in the actions of Gordie, of Holly, of the countless Nest Watch programs all over the world. There's art in scientists and authors and artists like Rachel Carson and Robert Fuller. There's art in people who care, who get others to care, and who carry that priority into the voting booth. So much of our lives are human-centric. Hustle culture has trained us not to stop and smell the flowers, but to take a step back and acknowledge that we're not the most important thing on earth. That's art.
The 3 remaining chicks spend one last night in the nest box. And by the following morning, all 3 fledge.
Looking at this old wood, thinking, what can I make out of these 3 pieces of wood? I look up and here it is. Hey, buddy.
Almost a week after fledging, Friday returns to visit the nest box. She takes one last look and takes off. Three more times throughout the month of August, a new kestrel visits the box. The kestrel looks around. He even makes a nest scrape. Once again, the box is empty. And it'll all start again.